Christ are the things that Christ said on the cross. And they're not actually 7 words, although I guess maybe I should have counted how many words there are, but it's more than 7. Could be 8. And so yeah, that's what this is called, 7 Last Words of Christ. And it's divided into sections, I guess, and each one is titled after one of the last sayings of Christ. And I should say this, I suppose. The reason it sounds the way it sounds when I read it is because it is, I mean, fun fact for those of you who don't care, all of my poems are metrical. They all rhyme, and they're all in meter very strictly. I haven't written a free verse poem in like a decade, because I can't. But this specifically is, for those of you who care, iambic dimeter, 2 beats a line. So there you go. The 7 Last Words of Christ. And it's in my 4th book, which I just finished. 6. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. The dream he most dreams often dreams is a dream in which he doesn't know he's falling until he wakes about an inch or so above his bed, and then he crashes, face first bouncing into his bed. He never in, the dream falls backward, as far as he can tell, not ever, not once, not that he can remember, although it's hard, sure to be sure, and if you asked him, he would admit he wasn't sure, although how would the subject ever come up, or maybe it would, it probably would. 5, I am thirsty. If you, maybe if you, and he were sitting together stoned, together, or you wouldn't have to be sitting, you could be in any position, and maybe together, lying on a bed together would make more sense, but by then you and he would have already had this conversation, or a conversation like it, equivalent, loosely intimate, the kind of conversation new lovers have, naked people together who have no history together except they have consumed each other talking, and it might be you haven't met the person you will fuck tonight, and for the next 6 years I won't record the conversation here about the dream he dreams, most often dreams, and even if you and he did have that conversation, really he probably wouldn't talk about it, how he isn't sure whether he falls forward or backward, because the dream always ends with him waking just before he crashes into his bed, and he can't ever and hasn't once remember anything that happens in the dream before he wakes in and from the dream, and he wakes like any body, bleary, but not the same bleary he and anybody usually wakes in, because he also wakes terrified, but it's hard to know sure why for sure, because he can't remember the dream itself, not ever, but only waking in and from the dream, which might not be part of the dream, but a consequence of the dream, and he's not sure whether consequences are parts of old things, are new and separate things, their own things, and so he might be in the dream, assuming it's the same dream every time the same, which he does. That's an assumption he makes because it always ends the same way. He might be falling backward, even though he always crashes face first, and it's sure also hard to be sure because he wakes terrified, bleary terrified, which is repeatedly the worst kind of terrified he has ever felt, and maybe that sounds strange to you. Maybe if you haven't felt it yourself, you think bleary terror would be dulled terror, but it isn't. And if you asked him, he would tell you it's the worst kind of terror, because waking bleary, terrified feels for a second the confusion, disorientation, that first waking second like being lost in terror forever, like how it feels to be a child and lost, not a small child big enough to know what it means to be lost or to have your mother die. And it's not just something you in your angriest moments, which weirdly feel in retrospect constant like you, must have been angry every day, and most of the day, every day, even though you can't recall a single particular time you wished your mother were dead. To have your mother die and it's not, just something you wished would happen, but still small, that kind of lost.